Welcome back to Embodied Wellness Radio, a podcast framed around creating the happiest and healthiest lives that we can create through nutrition, movement, mindset, hormones, psychology, and so much more. Sara Shorten joins us on today's podcast to speak about a topic that I think will be a huge resource of information for women, especially in a time where it's very confusing to express yourself. The topic is female sensuality. And this is perfect because Sara is a love, sex, and relationship coach that is on a mission to help women and couples thrive using mindfulness and tantric-inspired practices. Sara, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so I do go under the title of love, sex, and relationship coach, but what I really love to do is to specialize in helping couples to develop clarity on what they truly desire to experience in their relationships, and then to become essentially the experts on how to love one another. And I began that journey because I myself was so entranced by the art of relationship and how much personal growth was needed in order for me to feel truly safe and happy and to thrive in my own relationship. And I also love working with women to connect to their radiance, to their sexual confidence, and to bring more pleasure into their lives, which is so needed.
Yeah, it's definitely very a needed space and often overlooked in the health and wellness space. We focus a lot on what's going on in your mind, what's going on in your body, and all of these kind of really tangible and feasible ways to improve. And a lot of the time what we're missing out on is that energetic connection and that connection back to yourself where all of this stems with, that allows you to show up as this confident and beautiful and embodied woman, both for yourself and also in your relationship. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about what female sensuality even is and kind of how you can describe that embodiment of female energy and confidence.
Absolutely. Well, one thing I did want to say first off is that to use the word feminine, to use the word masculine has its limitations, and that femininity versus masculinity is really best described as a spectrum of expression that is unique to each individual. And that the word feminine, I believe, and I think a lot of people would agree with, can be characterized by qualities such as like softness or surrender, but also alternately by sort of wildness and power. And so when we're talking about sensuality, I really see that as when you're living so fully in your life and so fully inside of your own body that you can really tap into your own aliveness and to the full range of emotions, of sensations that you are capable of. And so for those that identify as being a woman and live inside of female bodies, it is an incredible resource, an incredible journey to be able to feel so deeply centered in your own sensuality in your own body, because that's where your power lies. And it also is where a lot of the the ability for us to make space for all the things that we truly desire involves getting onto the level of the body. And so when I think of female sensuality, it's like an art form that you can connect with, that allows you to feel like the best version of yourself. And that's something that you get to decide on. Like, you get to decide what that looks like for you. But I know that for many women, they feel as though many women spend a lot of their lives prioritizing when it comes to, say, to sex or to their daily lived experience, they're prioritizing others a lot, or prioritizing what they think they should do. And I'm really interested in women tapping into the authentic expression of their own bodies and of their own desires, and really getting clear on those things so that they can have the kind of life and the kind of relationships that they truly want.
Yeah, and do you think that when you're doing work with women that it's important for them to do some work to discover this on their own before they try to discover that in a relationship? Because for some women, as you mentioned, there's this kind of prioritization of other people and of men, especially in a sexual space, and it can be uncomfortable for them to try to discover that with their partner. So would you find it more beneficial for women to involve some like self-pleasure practices and deeper connection to themselves before understanding how to show up as that confidence and that power in a relationship?
I definitely see what you're saying, and I think there's a ton of value in, say, a woman would like to be in a relationship or who is currently single, spending that time connecting with their own body prior and connecting with their own desires and the truth of who they are prior to moving into a relationship. But I also think that there's space for that to occur anytime. Like, it can occur during when you're amidst a relationship as well. It's really like, deciding to start that journey or deciding that this is something you want to prioritize in your life more. But that being said, I mean, if you are a single person, then connecting with yourself through self-pleasure practices, through I can go into these in more depth, but through just like things that allow you to, on a daily basis, to feel more connected to your sensuality, can absolutely help you to not only to make clearer and more in alignment choices when you're dating, but also to help to increase your magnetism, for you to feel like you're like your most true and lit up self while you're dating. And and then essentially just to be able to navigate that whole field from a place of feeling centered in yourself and centered in the amazingness and the radiance of who you are. And that's what I truly want women to experience, is to just be in love with themselves, to fall in love with themselves, with their bodies, with their desires, the choices that they make, to feel like the things that they do are enough and that they matter and that they are worthy and deserving of all the things that they want. And and that, if whether they're in a relationship or not, that they have the right and the ability to speak up for those things and to own those things. But there's no denying that getting to know your own body and getting to know your own pleasure unto itself is going to help you to feel better in every aspect of your life, and whether that's on your own or in a relationship.
I feel like this past year of all of these Rona lockdown situations has been horrible for so many people in many different ways, but it's also given a lot of people an opportunity to step into their greatness in so many different other areas of their life. I feel like this is a circumstance, for example, that is allowing a lot of people, if they put their mind and their energy to it, to allow them to step into that self-empowerment through their sensuality. So for the people that are in a relationship, at least they have a partner at home when they're spending most of their time at home, and they can work with somebody through that. But I think we need to have empathy for all of those individuals who are by themselves 90% of the time, which is very hard. Humans are pack animals. We need connection with people, but it's very hard to connect with people on an honest basis when you don't have that I would say emotional intelligence and self-awareness to be able to do that truthfully without putting up some sort of a mask of who you really are. So if we could step back even a little bit to what you said about there's certain practices that women can use on a day-to-day basis that allows them to find that sensuality with themselves. Right now is a really good time for people to take those actionable items and bring them into your life. So what are a few of those actions?
Well, one thing I would say for sure, one that I think is a really good starting place, is exploring your own body and taking the time to do that in a really curious and loving way.
And non-judgmental.
So you can wake up in the morning and immediately begin to breathe into breathe into your belly, breathe into your pelvic floor. You can offer yourself sensual massage and loving words through your touch, and give yourself the opportunity to connect to what you really, essentially, what is it that you most need to hear, or what is it that, that is going to feel like the medicine for you in that day? So, and just on a sensual level, like by caressing your own skin and taking deep, deep, full breaths and centering into yourself, sort of setting the stage for like, I'm here, I'm present, I'm connected to my body. I love my body. I have reverence for the the curves and the shapes and the folds of my body, and I want to commit. I want to commit to listening to it fully and to speaking kindly to it, and and also to really exploring like what is it that brings me pleasure. And if that it can be something that is as simple as just staying with your breath or staying with gentle touch, or you can absolutely move into self pleasure. But yeah, I think that starting your day with something that is like a ritual for self love and connecting to your body is really powerful. And something else that I just would love to see as more and more humans doing, but women especially, is checking in with themselves and really making it a priority to find out what it is that delights them. Like, what are the things that like really bring them life and excitement, and whether that's a certain kind of music or dancing or colorful food or like, yeah, I absolutely love having a long extended phone call with my girlfriend, or I want to just like take the rest of the night off and like do nothing other than have a bath or watch my favorite show. Like really connecting to permission and to pleasure and romancing yourself and delighting yourself, essentially. Like if you yeah, like in a moment to moment basis throughout the day. Like, I don't know, for example, like today for me, I was like, I really want to put on these badass earrings.
They are
like,
pretty badass.
And I was like, and this like, it delights me like to wear these and to have that sparkle. Yeah, and then like, when I'm making my breakfast, I'm like, oh, what kind of music do I want to play? And I'll just like play something that to me is like, I don't know, like 1960s, like Motown or something. It just like gets me grooving and feeling good. Or and then I'm like, okay, like what do I like really want to, like what would be my ideal breakfast? I'm like, okay, like I want this, like I want peanut butter toast and like this kind of a smoothie, like just really as opposed to it being these are things I have to do today, and I have a series, because I do have things obviously that I have to do, like, but like along the way, weaving in, like, I want to make pleasure a priority in my life, and I want to enjoy. As much of my life as possible, and so yeah, so like you can make a list of things that delight you. You can just pay attention to the things that do, and then be like, okay, like that's a thing that I like love having in my life. Like I got to make that a priority.
Well, I think we should definitely do that, actually. And what I was going to say is we can make kind of I like what you said about creating kind of a morning ritual. Like, obviously, it doesn't have to be so stagnant and structured all the time, but having an actionable place to go back to and go, here's 3 things. If I didn't quite feel like myself yesterday, here's 3 things I can do today in the morning and nighttime that can draw me back into me. So I was thinking what we could do even after this podcast, once we're done talking, is we can create a little thing for people where they can do these 3 things in the morning. Perhaps it's breath work and meditation practice, and 3 things at night, such as like a bath or a certain massage that they can perform in themselves. Like that could be an awesome resource for people. So after this podcast, we'll figure that out, but people can find that at embodiedwellnessco.com/blog/007. You get to be 007. That's pretty awesome. That's our 7th podcast, so pretty exciting. But if people want some of those awesome resources that we're going to provide, you can find it there.
I also love the note of inviting pleasure into things that you're already doing, because I think that there's a disconnect between women feeling like they have to make time to to do something they love. I have to set aside time. I'm so busy. When the better question is, here's what I'm doing today. How can I invite joy and pleasure into those things? You're already making breakfast. Why not make it a pleasurable experience? You don't have to set aside an hour each day to take care of yourself. You can really invite this mindfulness meditation practice where you can bring this joy and bring this pleasure into things that you're already doing. It doesn't need to be a set time or routine. If you feel like you're really busy and you're kind of stuck and you don't know where to start with the things that you're already doing and ask yourself, how could I make this pleasurable? How could I show up to this experience with joy? So I really love that you kind of noted on that. And that's actually something that I do every morning in my morning routine. I look at my schedule. What do I have to do today? And then the question I ask myself is, how can I do these things with joy and excellence? So I'm not just going through the day and executing mindlessly. It's like, I'm going to show up as my best self in all of these things that I get to do. I don't have to do them. I should do them. Some of them are my responsibilities, but really you can bring joy into anything that you're doing. And it doesn't have to be a set aside time. It can be just moment to moment, you reflecting and really tuning into yourself.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, I love that. Like, I love hearing it. You said the joy and ecstasy for yourself. That's so cool. That's yeah, and like I love that. Clearly, those words resonate with you, and like when you say them out loud to yourself, you're like, oh yeah, I know what that means. Like oh yeah, I know what it means to access joy and ecstasy. You know, and so somebody else might have other words that resonate with them, right? If it's like, but yeah, I mean. It is, I think it is so important that we try to not have our own self-care feel like another thing on the to-do list. And it is a really good strategy for sort of lessening that mental load by just saying, yeah, in the things that I'm doing right now, like, how can I get more pleasure out of this? What would make this more pleasurable? And it can just make it everything. And that sort of, that question is fun unto itself. Like and as you continue to ask yourself that question, you and continue to follow that path of like, yeah, of just exploring fun, then you just naturally start to feel better and to start to, feel more radiant, feel more like yourself. And that really benefits not only you, which I believe is the most important thing, that your energy is for you first and foremost, but then it benefits everybody around you. And it really, because, and not that, like, the last thing I would want is that for people to think that they need to be all in joy and pleasure all the time. In fact, there's a whole other side of embracing female sensuality that involves full emotional liberation and really being in all of your emotions and allowing yourself to express them. But yeah, undeniably, like, whether it's your partner or your friends or like, people want to see you enjoying yourself and being happy and pleasing yourself. And it's a woman that is in pleasure and a woman that is feeling, like, excited about life is a blessing to the world. Basically, It's like that quality of feminine energy, of feminine radiance, is such a blessing to the world.
It does. It lights a whole room up, I feel.
It's magnetic, and it influences others to allow them to have permission to enjoy themselves as well. And I think that one thing that could also be really beneficial for a lot of our listeners is that physical aspect of connecting to energy in your body. So it's kind of interesting because a lot of us are so focused on physical activity as moving and structured workouts, etc. But if you ask a lot of women today to like dance by themselves or do something like a hip circle, even if there's nobody watching, many women still feel this guilt and shame, like, oh, this is kind of weird. Am I going to be judged? And so I love what you said about just that gentle touch for yourself and also giving yourself freedom to move and to be curious about movements and excitement and pleasure in your own body by things like dance or just moving freely. And so really bringing this connection back to the fact that we shouldn't feel guilty or awkward to move in this like physical earth suit vessel that we're given. But unfortunately, because there's been so much stigma around female sexuality, is that many women feel uncomfortable to even move freely in their bodies as well.
I think there's a reason for that, though. I mean, we're looking at a generation really of hypersexuality on social media, for example. And it's really tough because you see these women who are embracing, yeah, maybe it's dance, maybe it's movement, maybe it's all of these things that are really good. And they're trying to put it out there to people as a, look how good you can feel. But the problem is there's this almost commoditization of dopamine, really. Every time a new woman puts that out there, they're dancing and they realize, oh, people are liking this. And all of a sudden you get this response of all these people liking the photo, commenting on the photo, but it's not always inducing like this positive effect for people. They feel like it's positive in the beginning, and the initial act of doing it, the meaning is meant to be good, but it ends up creating like this element of insecurity, really. Because as soon as it is being produced then on social and being documented, all of a sudden there's another attachment to it of just that. So I think this is a very tough topic. And we've talked about this, and I'm having trouble finding an end point of where is the fine line between hypersexualization and leaning into your sensuality as a man or a woman. Really, it doesn't really matter. But is the issue with the documentation of it? Because you can do all of this stuff on your own. I know lots of people that do it on their own. Sarah sings all the time. There's no issue with that at all.
I'm always singing and dancing around the house.
She's always singing, and there's nothing wrong with that. But all of a sudden, is the issue where when you film that in a scantily clad outfit and then posting it on social media, is that empowerment, or is that justification for empowerment, but really just looking for a dopamine response for yourself? It's a tough topic, but it's been bothering me, and I've been trying to find a good way to answer this. And I know we're going a little off script on this one, but I feel like you would be one of the better people to ask.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, we really are in a time like no other in history, where we have so many more choices about how we can express ourselves, at least in the Western world. And yet, and also find ourselves inundated with mirrors of other people and images of other people, and are constantly in this cycle of wondering whether we measure up. And so, shame and comparison culture, and especially among women, but among all human beings, is so prominent. And I think when it comes to how you express yourself sexually, whether that's online or in your everyday life and relationship, or when nobody's looking, like, the core thing is that, to me, what matters is, does it feel like the truest expression of that individual? And is that what they really want to, is that what really feels like for them, their highest expression of themselves? And whether they choose to share it or not. And it's, I personally think that there's nothing wrong with wanting to share images of yourself being sexual online. I think that, or whatever it is, being in your sensuality, in your confidence. But I do think it is important to acknowledge and name what it can bring up in women and what it can bring up in men as well, and and have conversations about that, basically, like around, what is it that if you're not, if say, for example, it brings up a feeling of that I'm not enough, then how can we care for that? And how can we how can we connect with what it is that is true for you? And is that something you'd like to be doing? And who would you need to be, or what would need to feel safe inside of yourself in order to do that? Because we all have different experiences that color the level of safety that we feel in our sexuality. And we have stories, conditioning, and that really can have a profound impact on the choices that we make and the way that we feel embodying our sexual self. So, I mean, maybe our culture is more sexualized than ever, but there still is so much shame around sexuality, and that's something that I feel so strongly about helping to heal. Is that, like, instead of it being that there's something shameful about this, that there's something common and shared and beautiful about this among humans, and that we all have our own sexual story, and we all have our own unique things that that turn us on, that are to us the pinnacle of living your fullest sexual self, or what you want to experience in as a sexual being. And I'm interested in how does each individual connect to that in their own way, and to work with the shame that comes up around that, because it doesn't mean that shame won't ever come up, but like that, how do we work with that shame and gradually move towards a feeling of confidence and empowerment and safety, as much as possible within the context that we're living in. And but yeah, so I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's definitely, like, those are my general thoughts on that, on how it shows up in social media too, and I think, like, we could all stand to probably turn down the volume on the amount of things that we're taking in on social media. And if something is feeling like overwhelming or too much, then it's a good opportunity to look at that and to be like, hey, like, I want to do some healing work here around this. And and it's an opportunity for growth, basically. Like, if you get triggered, it is an opportunity for growth.
So one of the key things that I loved hearing from you right there is saying that do it because it feels right in your soul, not because it feels good. Because I think that's where a lot of the issues are stemming from, is because you could maybe post a very scandalous selfie with your tits out, nips barely covered, and you get 300 likes. And that one cute guy that you saw at the gym the other day, he liked that photo, and you feel good. But now you have it in your mind that you have to continue doing that. And instead of living in your empowerment, it's more of a self-objectification, I feel. I could be wrong. I feel like, from my perspective, and of course I'm a guy, I'm looking from a guy's perspective, but I've always looked at that as being a scandalous thing, rather than living in your soul of what is true sensuality and expressing yourself. And that's not the same thing. And that's the difficulty of this, is it's a very fine line. But I think you answered that question very well.
I think one thing that's also important to note is the intentionality behind it. Am I doing this because I feel beautiful in this photo and I felt like $1 million and I really wanted to express and to show this side of me? Or am I doing this because I'm attached to the outcome that I think is going to happen when I put myself out in this way? Is this true for me, or am I allowing others' truths to rule my decisions? And I think this comes back to giving yourself permission to even understand your desires, because to some extent we've blocked that. We've gotten into this idea, I should do this, I should do that. And like, even listening to Sara, isn't it refreshing to hear somebody who's just genuinely happy? And doesn't it seem lovely? Like, when you're listening to this, you probably smiled when she was like, oh, I just bring pleasure into my life. Like, we want that, but we've almost blocked that from us. Like, going back to the idea of dancing, if you ask a lot of women to dance, they'll be like, oh, well, I don't know how to dance. And it gets very uncomfortable. Like, that's like saying, I don't know how to breathe, or I don't know how to meditate. We can all do it, but have you blocked off the ability for you to express yourself freely because we become so attached to other people's truths, blocking our connection to ourselves? And I think this is where, like, permission and self-reflection are so key. If you don't ask the right questions, you're not going to get the right answers. How can you expect yourself to show up as confident and happy if you've never done the work to understand what you even want? We've just been indoctrinated into what we should want, what other people want from us. But if you've really never asked yourself the question and gave yourself permission to not only answer the question, but to act on the answers that you are given, you're always going to feel some sort of a level of disconnect, because we really need to nurture that self-relationship and that understanding of our own desires and what really brings us pleasure outside of what anyone else is doing, in my opinion.
Yeah, answering the questions without judgment, but also without justification based on your insecurities. Because we can always ask ourselves a question and then answer it the way we want to hear it. I have a lot of problems myself that I'm dealing with. And I thank you for helping me with that. But I could answer those questions with the justifications based on those insecurities, on the answer I want to hear, and that's never going to help me. But that kind of goes back to the same topic of emotional intelligence and self-awareness. If you don't have those two things in place, it's very hard to ask those questions. And yeah, sometimes unpeeling the onion might mean you're going to sit there and bawl and cry because you realize you've been living a lie around that certain topic in your life for a long time. And it is very difficult. But once you do that, oh, the freedom you feel, the ability to have any conversation with anybody. I'll tell another guy that I cried to a country song because there's a certain line in that song that made me feel a certain way. I don't feel weird about that. They might look at me a little strange and be like, dude, really? But it's just my truth. And I think that's another just point to add on to that. But what you said there was beautiful.
And also that it's okay. It's okay if you're listening to this and you're 30 years old, you're 40 years old, you're 50 years old, and you don't know what you want. It's okay. It is never too late to nurture that relationship, to take the time. Like, there shouldn't be any guilt or shame around like, oh my gosh, I don't really know what I want, and you're asking me this question. Like, it's okay, right? Be gentle with yourself, be tender in the questions you're asking, and the time it takes you to figure out the answers, you have the rest of your life. And this is a lifelong process of, we change, our desires changes. It's really a moment-to-moment basis. So if you're listening to this right now and you're feeling a little bit lost, or like, how could I not know what makes me happy? Just know that it's okay and it takes time. And that when you spend the time to ask the right questions and allow yourself to go through all of the emotions and all of that resistance to get the answers, the payoff is so worth it. So do your best and be patient with yourself.
So well said from both of you. And yeah, it's honestly like a powerful journaling exercise that I come back to on a regular basis, which is just to ask, what do I really want? What do I really want? And then if once you have an answer, you can ask yourself, like, and why do I really want that? Like, and keep deepening into it. And why do I want that? And why is that important to me? To really, just start to carve out the truth of your, really of your original essence, like who you really are, and to give yourself, and then we come back to that word, which I love, is just permission, and the permission to pursue those things, and to believe that they're that you're worthy of them, and that there's that you'll be supported on your that you'll find community that'll support you on your journey to pursuing it. And really, because another thing I really feel strongly about with the word permission is just trying to take a lot of that shame and self-judgment out of our lives as much as possible. I think especially with women, we have a tendency to just judge ourselves so harshly in every aspect of our lives. And so part of permission is like, maybe like you do something that you know is not the best habit for yourself. You kind of are like, you know what, I'm just gonna give myself permission for right now, or like, or I'm gonna acknowledge that, okay, that maybe isn't the most in the highest alignment with me, but I'm gonna try to forgive myself almost immediately, and really just be like, I'm doing my best, and acknowledge yourself, acknowledge the things that you are, that you're kicking ass at in life, and the ways that you are so successful and so lovable, and to just basically just be a little bit easier on yourself. And that's why, and then to be like, okay, well, now that I'm, when you can revisit that place of self-compassion, of self-acceptance, and just recognizing, okay, there's areas here where I want to grow, or things that I want to look at more clearly and honestly, and that don't feel integrative, like that feel like fragmented parts of myself or something. But you can always start now. Like, you can always start in the next breath, and and choose again. So anyway, just permission for all the wildness of the journey and for it not to be perfect, and to go after the things that really matter to you.
I love that. And so we touched a little bit earlier on how you love helping people in their relationships figure out their true desires. And I know that many people who are living with their significant other, likely in the past few months, have spent more time together than you probably have in a long time. And so for many people, this is beneficial. For some, it might have brought up a little bit of tension. And so I think it would be really useful to give the listeners a few action items to allow them to show up better or to kind of strengthen their relationship with their partner.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing I do really recommend is that partners create a time, maybe once a week, where they have an opportunity to check in with each other more deeply, to ask one another, like, okay, like, how was this last week for you? Or like, what's something you'd really like me to know? Or what's something that you're, something you're afraid of? There's this beautiful, simple practice I use with couples a lot, which is called desires, fears, and loves. And you can ask your partner, what is it that you desire? And then they have an opportunity to respond. And all you do is hold space and listen. And then after, you can continue asking them, what do you desire? What do you desire, until they feel complete, and then change over to the other partner. And then you can do that with, what are you afraid of? And then you can also do that with, what do you love about me?
When you're asking about desires, what do you mean by desires?
Hey, Denon, what do you love about me? Let's go back to that one.
That's going to be a whole podcast on its own. Have you got time for that? When we're talking about desires, like, is that physical? Is it your space? Is it, babe, I really need the dishes done? Like, what are you talking about with desires?
That's a good question. I mean, essentially, I would say when it comes to asking the question, what do you desire? Either it can be answered from purely what is alive for that other individual, like whatever comes to mind. Like, it could be in the greater realm of their life, like in their career, or it could be in the context of the relationship or their health and fitness or whatever. But it can be something more general, or you could also do a desire, fears, and loves just around the relationship, where you say, what do you desire for our relationship? Or like, what do you desire sexually? Like, absolutely, you can do it that way too. And then do that about, see, there's so many fun ways to work it, basically.
I like this.
And then you can do that about, and the thing is that's great about the what are you afraid of is that it tends to bring up some of those deeper rooted issues that are just kind of brewing beneath the surface that need to get brought up to attention for love and integration. And then finishing with what do you love about me is just such a nurturing thing to do for your partnership, to connect to the reason why the two of you are absolutely, why you choose this, like why you choose to be with one another. So who doesn't love receiving that, right? Mm-hmm. It can be difficult sometimes to receive it, but in general, people tend to really enjoy that portion. And then also I'm a big fan of something called a love action list, where essentially each of you writes down the specific things that allow you to feel most loved or really speak love to you. Whether that's like, I love it when you like play with my hair and stroke my hair, or I love it when you tell me how good I am in bed, or like I love it when you drive me to, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes my partner drives me to work. I like driving me somewhere, or like, what is it, and there, of course, many people have heard of love languages, and that's always an interesting topic to get into with your partner, and it kind of falls into that same category of talking about getting, with a love action list, you can give a specific blueprint over to your partner of, this is how you can love me better, basically.
I think a lot of guys need to read that book. Like, if you are in a relationship and your man is not, well, even if you don't know what the love languages are, maybe you and your partner could read that together, because I read that a few years ago, and for me it was, I started talking and telling people about it. I was like, have you read this book? Because for me there was so many just mind-blowing moments. I was like, in past relationships, I'm like, I missed so many of these cues and I could have showed up better. And it's so exciting to then move that forward. And obviously, Sara and I, we talk a lot about these things. We're very open with each other. But I think how many of my friends and people I know who could have even just as, it's a very simple read, but yeah, The 5 Love Languages, it's an amazing book that I recommend a lot of guys to look into, because I feel like most guys aren't as tuned into these things as much as especially women are. So ladies, get your man that book.
And I think it's important to also set aside time to nurture your relationship. So rather than living or existing as like roommates and friends, we really love spending time together, we love physically being together, we love having sex together, to ask those important questions of, this is a relationship, this is an energetic exchange, and it needs to be nourished, and we need to ask questions of how to improve it, what's working and what's not working, so that we can continue this for a long time. Because I find there's a lot of the times we don't take time to nurture our relationships and things get brushed under the rug, and this is where a lot of issues start to arise, not only with other people but also with yourself. And so I love what you said about taking the time to ask these questions and to hold space for answers without getting defensive, because being in a relationship, we have almost this layer we need to peel back where I might ask a question and I get an answer that I might not be ready to or want to hear. So rather than being defensive and like, oh, well, I do a lot of other things, or like, I'm trying my best, hold space for it. You don't have to respond. You can just listen to what your partner has to say, and you can go away and you can sit with that, and you can think about how you're going to improve on it. And so I think another important aspect is going into these discussions, knowing that you might hear something that might be triggering for you, and that you just need to hold space for what your partner wants. Because if I get triggered and I act out of a triggered response, or I seem offended, my partner is going to be less likely in the future to show up with their truth and to be honest with me, because I had that emotional reaction to what they had to say.
And look, we're all busy. Absolutely. Everybody's busy. Most people nowadays are working 12 to 14 hours a day. That's not an excuse to avoid these conversations. And it's especially when you are as busy, or perhaps you are entrepreneurs like us, you need to have those decisions even more, or so those conversations even more often.
Yeah, and that's something that I teach with couples and demonstrate and encourage couples to do a lot, which is to the art of listening without needing to fix or just wanting to argue or prove them wrong, and just to really create an open field of space for anything to exist. Yeah. So yeah. And last thing I'll probably add to things you can do with your partner is every now and then just like spoil each other. Like all the little everyday things are, to me, like the most important, but also just like giving an opportunity like to massage one another, for like, be like, I'm going to give you a full body massage. Like, it doesn't need to be like incredibly often. Trust me, if you do this one time in a month, your partner will remember it. But yeah, like I want to gift you like a time where you just get to receive like all the things that I know that you love, and go back and forth and do that with each other every now and then, and make a little bit of time. It can even like 15 minutes of that goes a long way. So
I think it's tough for people, right? Because at the end of the day, love is a choice. After a certain amount of time, we lose those chemicals that rush through our body during the first time we obviously meet that person. Those chemicals eventually go away. But it also goes away with ourselves, because we can be so hard on each other or on ourselves on a day-to-day basis. I know I am. I've got enough things going on. And if I don't do one of those 16 things in a day, I'm like, I've failed today. And that's not fair. So we need to commit to the fact that love is a choice long-term on both ourselves and our relationships. And if we can do it with ourselves, we're going to be able to show up in our relationships so much better. But Sara, I'm so happy that you came on the podcast today, because I think we covered a bunch of topics that are have probably been on people's minds and have been maybe hard to talk about in their friend groups. And I really hope this can be an amazing resource for people to use. So if anybody wants to take a look at the notes that we've taken or the actionable resources that we've written out for this podcast, please visit embodiedwellnesscode.com/blog/007 to find some of the show notes. But where can people find you at, especially if they want to come to talk to you about either themselves or their relationships? or anything else.
Absolutely. Well, my website's under redesign right now, but you can still contact me on Instagram, Love Sara Deanne, and or lovesaradeanne@gmail.com. Yes,
For sure.
I'll have a website up in the next month.
And
Yay!
what is the website? Because people might be listening to this a few months after the website's up, for example.
Yeah, that's lovesaradeanne.com.
I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was definitely a much needed conversation for a lot of women, and we are so grateful to have had you on the podcast.
No, thanks, you guys. I had fun, and blessings to all those that are listening or watching.
Amazing. I hope to see you in person again soon. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. This podcast provides general information and discussions about health and related subjects. The information and other content provided in this podcast or any linked materials are not intended and should not be construed as medical advice, nor is the information a substitute for professional medical expertise or treatment. If you or any other person has medical concern, you should consult with your healthcare provider and seek other professional medical treatment. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you may have heard on this podcast or any linked materials. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The opinions and views expressed on this podcast are of no relation to those of any academic, hospital, health practice, or other institution.